I'm definitely not a precious writer. How do we introduce a character who is not of this world? You know, raw, reach up and grab your gut angst. Movie telling, storytelling. Yeah.
Movie storytelling. That's what?
Yeah.
Welcome to Zarnia for Games and Geekery. I am with very geeky Sean Drummond, filmmaker. What else are you?
I don't know. How do you define yourself? Filmmaker, screenwriter. I don't know. What a tough question.
I know, because I took the obvious answer away from you.
Yeah.
And I was like, you now have to
Ginger.
come up with something. You know, armchair astronaut.
Armchair astronaut, big time, yeah. Terrified flyer. So, destined never to be the astronaut he always dreamed of being.
I'm sorry. But, you know, now there's so many other ways of going into space. Do you follow, like, the live streams of launches and things?
Yeah. I even followed the live stream of David Blaine on the balloons a couple of weeks ago. Did you see that?
No.
David Blaine.
Is he still around doing things?
He is, but it was such a random find. It was a random YouTube recommendation. But it was captivating enough that we sat and we watched it for, a good hour and a half.
As a magician, a magician is someone who's like trying to deliver a certain kind of emotion to you, and that emotion is how.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a filmmaker, like, what's the emotion that you're trying to deliver to people?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I like worlds. I like sort of taking people outside of themselves or taking them into an interesting world, whether it be a full sort of sci-fi fantasy kind of space, or if it's just sort of the real world, but a little bit of the step to the side, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, our world, but like cracked a little.
Yeah, cracked is good. Yeah. So I like even a lot of some of the projects that we've been developing, and a lot of our early stuff was just sort of quirky short films where things are just a little bit to the side of reality. So the first film with I work. My company's Be Phat, Motel, and I work with Michael Matthews predominantly, who's just directed Love and Monsters.
But yeah, to speak to that, it has that same kind of energy that we were talking about, of like remixing reality a little bit, taking some things and looking at it in a new way. Which just segues over to Five Fingers for Marseille.
Yeah,
is that your first feature?
That was first feature. Yeah. That's
okay.
The first feature that we actually produced, not that we'd written, we've developed, like Lambda Child, which I guess we'll talk about, was something that's really old that we developed ages ago. But yeah, again, something of, trying to root something in reality and try and tell something that's essentially a contemporary South African story, and true, sort of politically or socially or whatever the sort of whatever those threads are that are woven through the story, but at the same time playing to the genre, playing to the westernness of it, and putting it in movie worlds, where it could be, the movie world things could be as subtle as visual choices, or a contemporary world where there's no cell phones or technology or anything, which was in Five Fingers they aren't, it was a conscious decision, not that it has anything really to do with the story, but the little things you do to create the world and make it as much of your world as possible. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Like, thinking of Five Fingers for Marseille, like, there's this element that a Western is in fact a kind of mythology, a kind of it is a fantasy setting. I think even for Americans it was a fantasy setting of, like,
totally.
It's an origin myth building for themselves.
Remember the West? Oh, geez, guys.
You
The realm of neo-Westerns right now are really interesting, because that question, like, what is a Western? I think you could ask 100 people and 100 filmmakers who've made Westerns, they might all have a different answer. So for me, when I was writing it and really trying to consume everything about... So Mike and I traveled the country. We did about 8,000 Ks around the country, visiting small towns, looking for real-world inspiration and sort of the elements and the fabric of the story world to build, and then also some elements that became part of the actual narrative. And at the same time, we were just consuming everything Western that we could get out. So we were watching, reading scripts, reading novels, reading a lot of Western theory. And this is where, for me, when people say, what is a Western? I think it sort of comes down to it's like the principles of the storytelling. And all story is conflict, and that great storytelling or screenwriting mantra. Story is conflict, and what I love about the Western is it's so pure because the conflict is the story. It's so conflict, like directly, brazenly conflict driven. And there's these 4 pillars of conflict. It's man versus man, or man, woman, but character versus character, black hat, white hat, good guy, bad guy, whatever it might be. It's man versus himself. It's especially the revisionist sort of Westerns. It's people wrestling with their demons or their past or whatever, pops up in the flashbacks every time the harmonica plays. It's men versus the land, man versus the land. It's sort of us versus the elements. Be it taming the West, or be it sort of wrestling, or even just our relationship with the space. And then it's also sort of man versus history, us versus the passage of time.
I also, when I watched it, there was this anime feel to it. Am I misreading things? There was this kind of the feeling of the bad guy. One of the best villains that I have ever seen.
Cool, thank you. Yeah. Anime, maybe. I think we wanted him to be so unworldly, and this is that thing about taking a step to the side again. So the world of Marseille in the movie is already a little bit of a step to the side. And then with the ghost, we wanted to go, how do we introduce a character who is not of this world? What's been really interesting is hearing people's analyses of the character, which is great. It's so cool to hear people with their theories and, is he even really there? Is he the manifestation of the collective conscience of all these guys in the town? Is he the ghost of colonialism, which is like a wild one? I think that somebody wrote an article, or I'm not sure what it was. But a character whose job is to be not even an agent of chaos. He is the conscience, because he's the guy who's coming in and looking into each of these characters, looking into the cracks inside them and prying and trying to force them almost to become the truest versions of themselves.
Yeah, there's that idea that he has a principle that he's exerting on the world.
In a way, he's the most, obviously he's flawed in his own way, but in a way he's the most principled character, and that he's going to come in and he's the judge and the peacemaker, But what he's going to do is he's going to push you, he's going to compel you towards manifesting your truest self.
Yeah, so kind of lawful evil.
Yeah, so if it's Tao who becomes the hero because he's pushed and pushed and pushed to be, the very flawed, broken anti-hero, but he's pushed to become that guy he was always meant to be from when he was a kid, and each of those characters is sort of pushed to become the truest versions, like a good or bad or ugly or just wounded,
In a sense, conflict isn't just things that stand in your way. Conflicts are things that stand in your way that push you towards development. Towards growth or destruction.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, movie telling, storytelling. Yeah,
storytelling. That's what. Yeah. Who knew that there was an art to it, that had all these things you're thinking of?
So my approach to the script, anyway, as a writer, is quite, I don't liberal. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm definitely not a precious writer, because you retell your story so many times. You have the script, which is I sort of say it's like making a case for a story, or like your opening argument for a story, because it's the foundations of the story. It's the most concise, most compelling, best possible sort of roadmap of all the elements to make this movie, be it character arcs, be it the actual plot, and then everybody else builds on top of that. So obviously the director, but be it your production designer, costume, your actors, every person's building on top of a document that's jobs to be the strongest possible foundation of a story, and then you shoot it, and of course things will change, and you'll consciously make decisions to change things, and otherwise you'll have weather problems or whatever reason you change so much of.
You'll discover. You'll discover something wonderful.
Exactly, you cut half the dialogue because maybe you realize the actors can do this without having to say a single word, and that is one of my favorite things. Actually, I think I overwrite dialogue knowing a lot of it will be taken out because it doesn't need to be there. One of my favorite things, and then you get in the edit. And you put it together and you retell that story in a way, and by the time it gets onto screen, the script almost doesn't matter, because only that matters. If the movie is shit and everybody goes, but the script was so good, it doesn't change the fact that this is what it is now. It's not that anymore.
In fact, right now you're wrestling with a couple of adaptations, aren't you? You're wrestling. Let's first talk about you're wrestling with two, Apocalypse Now, and you're wrestling with Knucklebone.
Yes.
Let's talk about Apocalypse Now. You did a proof of concept.
Yeah. So I guess it's getting to be a little while now, but it's such a crazy book. And Charlie and I had met before, I think, with other circumstances.
Charlie
Human, yeah. Who wrote the novel Apocalypse Now, and Kill Baxter, and the elusive third in the chapter, or third in the series. And a Canadian producer, Todd Brown, that we work with, found the book. I think he was flying back from South Africa to Canada and read the book over the course of the flight, landed, called me and said, we need to do this as a movie. And so we were like, yes, away we go. And so the first thing we did was a proof of concept, which was just a 7-minute short film that's freely available on YouTube. Click there. And the response was amazing. I think we also just sort of wanted to test the genre, because it's very genre and it's very movie. And we sort of wanted to dry run and see, could we do this? Like let's find what we're gonna do. Let's find the visual style, find the energy of it. And Doug was stoked with how the response has been to it. It's still doing festivals, but it's also available online, and people sort of like the YouTube comments are like, "Where's the movie? Where's the movie? Where's the movie?" And it's coming. I think the challenge of taking a book that's so expansive and so full of things and full of ideas, and Charlie's just like pouring ideas into the page. But a movie is a movie, a novel is a novel, and a movie is a movie, and I think it's the streamlining and trying to find what's the strongest possible core of this story to become almost the most, not the simplest possible version of it, but what's the cleanest film version we can do to introduce people to this crazy world that then we can expand on, where, if we go to series later on, or spin-offs. I mean, there's so many things in there. It's almost like there's potential to create a whole universe out of the world of Baxter, who's the character in Apocalypse.
Do you have a general approach to that process of distillation?
I think for me it's quite slow, I think. And it's because I like to give myself quite a lot of time between drafts anyway, because you rewrite, and I find to sort of like let it breathe and then discover it again helps me. So reading the book in the beginning sort of like 3 or 4 times and setting it aside for a while and letting that story kind of like permeate, and then sketching an outline and go, okay, if I'm going to just tell the best version of the story that I can think of, what are the elements from that pool of what I've sort of soaked up from the book, and how does that translate into something that I think is a good telling of the story? And then going back and cross-referencing a couple of times. It's an interesting process, though. Is it different to how you're approaching Knucklebone? No, same with Knucklebone, yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about that project?
I can.
Or is it still under wraps?
Well, I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it, but I think enough of it's public to go. It's being produced by Canadian producers and South African producers, and it's based on the book by Nchama Brody, and it's about witches in Joburg, and it's about an ex-cop and a cop who get sort of sucked into what seems at first like a very routine run-of-the-mill case, and then becomes something quite deep and dark and very... I didn't love Hereditary, and I didn't love... what was the next one he did? Midsummer. But what I did take out of both those films is just how tactile they were, and how you sit in the theater and you almost feel like the film getting inside of you and really making you feel uncomfortable. And so I think with Knucklebone, one of the things we want to try and do is tap into something, because it's about trauma and place, and it's about how places carry trauma. In Joburg, I think, Jesus, there's so much of that to draw from.
A very big South African feeling is the pervasiveness of...
Yeah. So we're exploring that, and I think for me, I'll be happy if the film really does sort of get up inside you. And again, because the book is plotty, so a lot of what we're doing with is cutting plot out and just focusing on mood and tone and theme and raw reach up and grab your gut angst.
Is there a particular thing about fantasy that is about making a person feel a certain way?
People talk about escapism, and I prefer wish fulfillment as a sort of term. So, like if we talk about role-playing games, it's sort of the same sort of thing. But when I watch whatever it is that I'm watching, it's like Spider-Man, for example, and I'm seeing Peter Parker become Spider-Man and discover this hero inside him. So it's like I'm going on that journey with him. That's what the role of the protagonist is, for the most part, carrying you as the viewer with that person on the journey for the 2 hours or the 10 hours if it's a series, or, like the infinite, never-ending days of our lives, whatever it is. With fantasy, you're able to take people on journeys that are literally fantastical and full of dragons, monsters, goblins, grand voyages, misty mountains, tunnels full of dwarven gold, and that's why D&D, and I'll introduce D&D into the conversation because why not?
Sure, okay, take my job from me.
I know what you like. I'm going to give you what you like.
Another filmmaker thing. I'm going to give you what you like, but not in the way you think you like it.
Yeah.
And also, I'm going to delay it a little bit.
Yeah. So it's a callback to, I'm sure, to something from the beginning of the episode. But D&D is great, and I just played my first D&D game over the lockdown, digitally. We were all, which was interesting because then it was sort of half of us were in Cape Town and half were in the UK and various parts of the UK, and being able to directly live the fantasy, the same way that people game. Sorry, I'm jumping around a lot, but the real. How immersive storytelling in gaming is right now, Last of Us or Red Dead Redemption or any of those things. It's being able to take control. It's a world that's as immersive as a movie is, but I don't need you as the filmmaker to take me on the journey anymore, because I can take myself on that journey through the game or through the character or through literally the role playingness of it.
How much control we take over from the storyteller.
And what I loved, because our DM was Simon Ratcliffe, who runs Sound and Motion Studios, and a lot of like really great group of players who are all long-time players, and I was the sort of newbie in the group, and I was like, woohoo! And he'd written a story himself. And I hope he doesn't mind me talking about this, but he'd written a story called Fallow Ground, which was designed as a like 2-part quick-fire game, and in the end stretched out to a 10-week sort of season 1, I guess we called it by the end of it, because it had a really great arc, really great narrative. But he'd sketched these characters, and everybody went so deep. Everybody, because it's, everybody had a secret, everybody had a goal, everybody had a second secret goal, and everybody was betraying somebody else. And as we went into it, nobody knew anything about anybody else. And so over 10 weeks, this shit got so deep. It got so deep that there was a whole, session, episodes. There was a whole session where all we did, and it was probably like the 8th week, so this is like the 8th episode, getting towards the end, like staring the big climactic finish. All we did was sit around a campfire confessing our secrets to each other. And Fuzzy, and he'd like written, he had a whole story for the week, and then he just sort of sat there going like, oh, guys, just keep it going.
Does anyone even have to roll anything?
No, I don't. It's probably like, maybe do you find truffles for the stew? But I think it's like, again, that if someone offers you the opportunity to inhabit a character world, a story, and that resonates with you, and you want to push it as far as you can possibly go, like, why not? So I think he was surprised that he was surprised by how far all the players took the characters, but I think what he did was the script, the foundation he put down was so rich and interesting in the first place, you couldn't help but build on top of that.
Yeah, Sean, it's what's the next thing on your plate? What is the thing that's immediately coming up?
So Apocalypse is ongoing. Knucklebone, there's another draft coming up now that I need to start. We've got some TV stuff we've been developing. We've got quite a deep, dark psychological thriller, which sort of draws on colonial religion and how, the damage that it's done, set in a small town. One of those small town pot boilers, actually.
But that is the thing about storytelling. You are saying, like, these are how people are. These are how the world.
Yeah.
This is how the world is in your storytelling, and the real world is very complicated and.
Very complicated.
All of those things are true.
People are complicated.
The best and the worst, and it's all mished up, and who's going to be on top. Sean, where can people find you on social media, or?
I'm on Instagram now at Sean Drums 2000, and our website bephatmotel.com, which has some of the older projects and newer projects coming up. Look out for Apocalypse Now. That's on Vimeo and YouTube and all over. But yeah, it's exciting, man.
And with that, I'm going to say goodbye, Sean.
Goodbye.
Rad chat, and I hope that we get you at our D&D table sometime as well.
Call me.
A season, for an episode.
Call me. Yeah, guest starring. Guest starring is the tree. I'll do anything. Yeah, thanks, John. Awesome.